Welcome to this episode of Careers Takeoff, where we learn the very best about how people can get ahead in their careers. I'm your host, Conrad. It's been a tough year for all of us. We've been forced by the pandemic to throw out established routines, set up home offices like here, be remote workers, while for some of us, we've also had to be home teachers. So how can we be resilient and be happy in this new workplace? Today's guest will give you some answers. Jessica Pryce-Jones has spent many years in finance, and then she started Eye-Opener, a learning and development consultancy. She's an experienced executive coach and has written the book, Happiness at Work, something we all want, right? So please join me and welcome Jessica. Hi, Jessica.
Hey, Conrad. Great to be with you today. Thank you.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. Jessica, let's just quickly kick off. My first question is, why is it important to be happy at work? Why can't we just turn up at the office, do the job, be satisfied with the cash, go home and lead happy lives?
So some people do that. So, you have a job, a career, and a calling. And a job you do for the money, a career you do for the money and a status, and a calling you do because you love it. And when you have a calling and you are involved in your calling, what we can see in the literature is that you are more liked by your colleagues, get better reviews, are promoted faster, get more job satisfaction, and you're paid more. So I think those are 5 really good reasons for wanting to be happy at work.
But is it realistic to get everyone to think, oh, my job has to be my calling? Because we also see people say about millennials that they're all about purpose and stuff, and actually work, sometimes you got to do the dirt, the grudge stuff.
Sure, and I'm absolutely with you. And I think the grunt and the grudge stuff is important because that helps you. It's the light and the shade. So if you don't have any dark stuff, difficult stuff that is routine and dull, you don't really appreciate the really good stuff. The stuff that when you find you being at your best self. So I completely agree with you. Is it realistic to have it all the time? No. And I think we bounce up and down in a job. So you see that when people first go into a new job, you get tons of enthusiasm and energy. And then that kind of dips off after a bit. And so then it's about finding the things that you really love and trying to do more of those bits, because that helps you contribute more.
In your book, Happiness at Work, I'm going to show it again for you, right?
Oh, thank you.
You mentioned 5 C's, and I'm not going to talk about all 5 C's because if you're watching this, you should read the book, really. But one of those C's was about contribution, which you just mentioned. How do you contribute more? And I wonder if you could talk a bit about how does an individual increase their contribution by this idea of contributing from inside out and outside in.
Right. So I think that contribution it's really tough. It's really tough right now because, here we all are working from home, and sometimes you get an idea of how well you're doing by just bouncing yourself off others and seeing what they're doing. So you have that external validation of what you internally are knowing and doing about yourself. So I do think that contribution has got tougher. And we all know that, you mentioned it, working from home, kids, the sheer constraints that we're all working under. And I do think that many organizations right now have some unrealistic expectations and think that it's business as usual. And it is just not business as usual. But briefly, contribution. So it's about achieving your goals, number one. And all the data says that. So there's a great researcher called Teresa Amabile, and she just says that her research is all about you just take one small step to your goals. And if you're doing the one small step to your goals every day, that's what primarily drives happiness at work. So goals, moving towards your goals. And that means having clear objectives, because if you don't have clear objectives, and it's astonishing the number of organizations I go into and people, they aren't really sure about what their objectives are. And when they've written them, they're then suddenly 9 months old and they just don't apply at all. So that's a review process is really worth having. Then in order to contribute, obviously you need to be able to talk about what isn't working. So raising issues is part of that. And I think raising issues right now is fundamental to our mental well-being and to our happiness at work, because things are tough, and we have to acknowledge that that's where we're at. And it's really impossible to work as a senior leader, or as any leader for that matter, if there's too big a discrepancy between what is actually going on for you and what you have to pretend is going on for you. That's called emotional labor, and it can lead to a lot of unhappiness when the dissonance between the two is too great. And finally, when we're talking about the outside in stuff, it's, do you feel secure? If you don't feel secure, you can't raise issues. If you don't feel secure, you'll be worrying about where you're at rather than your objectives and your goals. So that's the first packet. So shall I move into the second packet, as it were?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Go for it. Okay. So the second part, and you know what, Conrad, when I looked at the data, because we collected 50,000 questionnaires for this, when I looked at the data, I thought, oh my Lord, I cannot write a book just about listening. But being listened to is one of the fundamentals for contribution, because if you don't feel that you're listened to, basically you won't make the effort in order to contribute as much as you could. And I think that actually when you fundamentally think about it, listening, it's not the act of I listen to you, listen to me. It's that there's something deeper, that we have a relationship between us, so that when we're doing work that matters and you're working in a pair with your boss, with a colleague, whoever it is, external vendor, if they don't listen to you, you don't feel there's a real relationship, and therefore you withdraw a bit and you don't do what you could do. So I think it signals relationship. In the same way, positive feedback. We all want to know what we're doing well. I've just been approached by one client, and it's making me all itchy. They want to have a conversation about feedback, but the terminology that they're using is really painful. I wouldn't. Marks and Spencer used to have inquests. I mean, wow, you want to go and have an inquest with your manager? I don't think so.
We used to have postmortems.
Yeah, well, a postmortem for a project, maybe. But I think language is really important, because it sets the tone of something. So the more positive you are, it's really clear from the data that positivity breeds positivity. And then you get an upwards spiral of people wanting to do better, putting more effort in, and feeling that they can. And negativity brings you down. So it's so that's an important part of it, along with being respected and appreciated. So those are the things that really help us maximize our contribution.
Okay. I want to just remind people who are watching that you can always put any comments or questions in the comments box, whether it's on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube. I think there's a question here from RP. But before that, I wanted to ask Jessica, based on what you just said about feedback. It's something that's really important, I think. And as a manager myself, it's strange, but I never got any training to give feedback. It's almost assumed once you become a manager or leader, you should be able to know how to do this, right? And I found, especially in the last couple of months, actually, with the pandemic, that it's relatively easy to talk about outcomes and performance because those are quantitative. But I also see some people in my team, just their whole mannerisms are changing because of the pressures that they feel, right? They begin to, when they talk, they maybe turn their cameras off, or they don't look at you straight in the camera. They're always turning away, or they're just feeling kind of lethargic. How do you suggest leaders or managers can have a conversation when it's actually not these sort of tangible things? It's really these body cues that we limited body cues that we can see through Zoom.
You know what, Conrad? I was rung up by someone the other day. Well, I say rung up, it was a Zoom call. And they said to me, how are you doing? And I went, oh, fine. And they said to me, no, how are you really doing? And they wanted to hear. And I thought, brilliant question, brilliant pause. And it made me not go, oh, fine, you know, typical, yeah, I'm fine. But to talk about stuff and things, and stuff and things are what I call the important, is the important bits, the glue. And I think that that's a really good way of doing it, and not, because quite often what you do with a check-in is it's the beginning of a team meeting and you say, yeah, how are you doing? And everyone goes, fine, fine, fine. But I think you have to do it on a one-to-one basis and set out, I want to talk to you about how you're doing. I mean, how you're really doing, to check in with people. And then if they go, oh, it's fine, you say, oh, so tell me about workload. You probe a bit more. Tell me about family. Tell me about what's going well for you, what's not going so well. And then you dig a bit.
Okay. If I look at the comments, welcome Kritika from London, Michelle Munoz. Hi, good to see you, Michelle from Peru. Ashita's from Kerala, and we have this question here from RP. I'm going to just show that on the screen. So RP is asking, Jessica, do you feel psychometric or any other tools can be employed effectively to understand how various people excel in or are hindered by working from home?
That's an interesting question, because I think we've never had this. I don't think we're working from home anymore. I think we're living at work. I think we've got a different dynamic going on right now. Well, certainly those of us in the UK, a lot of us are living at work. So because this is a new phenomenon, I'm not sure that there are any psychometric tools which would actually right now measure who is growing from this experience and who is not. But I guess that leads us a little bit into resilience. And there are a couple of burnout inventories which are useful. Maslach's burnout inventory is a useful inventory, and it's out there, it's public. You can take the 7 questions and use and incorporate them. They're generally people show up by being cynical, being disengaged, the typical behaviors that you might expect. So and lack of compassion for self and others. So I think that those are some of the typical behaviors that you could see when someone's struggling.
Okay.
Lack of compassion, like we saw with your man from KPMG.
Yes. Yes. So first of all, I'm just going to show this. I think this is what you mentioned, Maslach's burnout inventory.
Exactly.
Yeah. Before we talk about KPMG, could you just tell us a bit more about what the burnout inventory is?
It's a burnout. I think that what we're seeing a lot of right now is burnout. I mean, people are feeling really ground down to the bones. And so burnout is when you have low energy, low motivation, low positivity. And so those are the things. And when you just are beyond exhausted. And by the way, I have been in burnout. So I know what it's like. Your brain doesn't work. Nothing sparks for you. So the burnout inventory could be a useful way of just exploring where people are at.
Okay.
By the way, I've got a new tool. Look, this is my motivation tool.
Oh, is that?
It's a little pot, and I got my family, because I think one of the things we're struggling from right now is boredom. And just having to keep going, and there's nothing new. If you were at work, you'd be walking down a corridor, you'd be going to a canteen, and you'd bump into someone, and you'd have a conversation, and the bits in between is where you get new ideas from. Someone would say, "Oh, have you looked at this article?" And you'd read it, or it's those the bits in between. I think we're missing the unexpectedness of life, which is spice and variation and variety. So I thought, this I've made with little I got my family to sit down and do it. And I've got things to do in 5 minutes, things to do in 10 minutes, things to do in 15 minutes. So here we go. Here's a 5-minuter. It's stretch up to the ceiling with your arms up and then down and breathe. Do 50 star jumps. That's from my husband. So I don't know what's in there. And I
this
just
could be a bit
something.
dangerous, isn't it? Depending on who you ask.
Depending, exactly. But I just wanted some stuff that, was going to be unexpected, that I didn't know what was going to be there when I wanted something else. So it's working for me.
Yeah. I'm looking at the comments. So welcome Alicia Adika from Cambridge. Oh, Priyan as well is here. And Adika says, what is let me post a comment there. Adika says, Zoom breakouts can't replace those water cooler conversations, which I guess is true. But I mean, Jessica, in the absence of this container of joy and mystery, I mean, what can we do virtually to replicate that?
So I when I'm doing team stuff, I set up a green room in Zoom, and I say to anybody, okay, if you want to have a side conversation, just shoot me a note. I'll put you in the green room. And so it's been really useful. And I think another way of just getting what people are feeling is to use chat really efficiently. So you can do, hashtag must speak, hashtag feeling low, and you just get people to put into chat. Use some hashtags and develop your own ones. I think that's a really useful thing to do.
Okay, that's very useful advice. So let's go on to what you were talking. We were talking about the head of KPMG UK. And for those of you who don't know, this was a kind of a mini sort of controversy or scandal where the head of KPMG UK, he's the ex-head now. He apparently in a Zoom all Teams calls told his staff, right, that they should stop moaning and stop playing the victim and get back to work. Everything's fine, etc. And there was so much unhappiness, and obviously people start leaking to the Financial Times, everything. And within days, first he came up with some apology, and then within days he had to step down. So, Jessica, I wanted to ask, how does a leader in this case try to build resilience in an organization without being very patronizing and condescending?
Well, I'd just like to talk a little bit about Bill Michael, because let's be clear, he'd been meeting clients. He implied in his talk that other people should be doing the same. He dismissed unconscious bias training, and he told his employees, as you said, to stop playing the victim card. Now, when you're a senior leader, hello.
Yep. Sorry, my smart speaker's going crazy.
When you're a senior leader, I mean, you don't tell people off in a public forum, especially when you're at the top of the pecking order. So, your role is to motivate and inspire others. It's what you're being paid handsomely. I mean, let's talk millions. You're being paid handsomely to do that. So, to deny that people are having a rough time, I thought was spectacularly crass. Senior leaders right now need to be showing empathy, and they need to be saying thank you and being grateful and appreciative of the effort that their teams and staff are making, and connecting at a human level, sending messages of support. So I think, if you can't do that fundamentally as a senior leader, you got to go. So it was the right call by KPMG. And I also think, I don't know whether, Conrad, you looked at his apology, but for me, it was a non-apology apology.
Yeah, I think I was just listening to a podcast where some people there's so many of these kind of fake apologies or non-apologies, where these two linguists have actually set up a website and they list out all these faux apologies. They just go after people like that.
Yeah, Because what he said is lockdown is proving challenging for all of us. All right, on your millions, it's really challenging for you. But lockdown is proving challenging for all of us. It was really poor little me. And he said, I'm sorry for what I said, meaning he regrets his words, and the way I said it, meaning he regrets his delivery. But he didn't apologize for the intention or the meaning. So he didn't show real responsibility or real contrition from where I'm sitting. But I'm sure other people have different opinions. It's just my opinion.
Yeah, it was quite a really strange turn of events when you think after all this time, leaders should kind of know better. We're going to go through some more questions, and I just want to let people know that we can always we can continue this conversation, actually, with me and anyone else who are watching. I'm going to be hosting a what I'm going to call the Careers Takeoff after party today, 4 to 4:30 p.m. and it'll be on Discord. So that's the Discord link, right? You can just follow that. If you've never used Discord before, you just have to install it, and there'll be a voice channel says Careers Takeoff after party, and then we can just talk about these issues or anything else. Love to hear more about how you feel about the show, what else we want to be you'd like to see covered. Jessica, I was intrigued. Actually, you wrote quite recently on LinkedIn an article about resilience, what it means, everything. And I thought the really intriguing part for me was the last part of the title, which is how to build resilience when worrying about work.
Yes.
Are you saying we can worry about things and still be resilient?
Yeah, of course. We're all human. But there's something lovely called the Zeigarnik effect, which is the tension of having unfinished goals. So that thing when you wake up in the middle of the night and your brain starts going and you haven't written something down. The secret of reducing the tension of an uncompleted goal and worry is to write stuff down. So you write it down, it's out of your head, it's on paper, it's logged somewhere. And that stops you doing so much worrying. And I think that also the worry part is we often worry about things we can't control. So if you're going to invest in worrying, because it is an investment of your energy and your time, think about what is it that you can influence? What is it that you can control? And that is worth worrying about. And the rest of it, divert yourself, do your 50-star jumps. Write that letter to your grandmother that you've always promised yourself that you would do, because she loves a letter. So do those things rather than wasting time on stuff you can't control.
I'm going to share some things that you sent me, Jessica. So this is, can you explain what this chart is? Is that what something from 1907?
Yeah, something from 1907. It's way, way old research by Yerkes and Dodson. And I think that what's really interesting about this graph is it talks about optimal performance. And, too much cortisol, when you've got to the hump of that normal distribution, you are already in exhaustion. So, and that makes you more vulnerable to everything. So I think that the takeaway from me from this particular graph is to note that optimal performance is not you at your max top. It's before you get to that, because once you're over the hump, you're in exhaustion, you get yourself to anxiety and then to burnout because your stress levels are too much. And stress, cortisol, is extremely bad for you. So when you're thinking about me at my best, it's not you at peak, it's prior to peak. And so I always encourage people to think, what's the 10% I'm keeping in the gas tank for me, so I don't get to that point?
And I think this is really an interest to me. This graph is really interesting because a lot of times in my conversations with students or with team members, people tend to think of stress as almost binary. I'm fine, or I'm really stressed, when actually there is this continuum. I mean, how do you suggest we figure out we're almost at the hump and pull back, and say no to things?
Yeah, exactly. Say no to things. So, as you said, Conrad, a little bit of stress is good for us. It's motivational. It helps us get out of bed in the morning and do our best. So, you want that little bit of adrenaline, little adrenaline jab to get you going, and push you that little bit further out of your comfort zone. But I always say to people that, I used to give it 100%. Nobody will notice the difference between your 90% and your 100% except you, because you will just say, right, I'm going to finish 10 minutes earlier. I'm going to allow myself 5 minutes for that coffee. So it's those tiny things that mean that you're not doing the 100%.
Mm.
So what are the tiny things that motivate and help you, I would ask?
Yeah. And you've got this other slide here about probabilities, which I think you've been saying, is this where this idea of don't stress over things you can't control?
Exactly. And I like the quote at the bottom, my life has been full of terrible misfortunes, none of which happened, by Montaigne, because we do stress about a lot of stuff. But when you think in terms of probabilities, and of course you can do a decision tree. If you've done an MBA, you'll know everything there's to know about doing a decision tree. But if we can only see binary solutions, it increases our stress and our cortisol levels. And so the psychological secret is to start looking instead in terms of probabilities. So let me give you an example, which is on that chart in front of you. So when COVID started a year ago now, my daughter was working on the West Coast, and she'd been there about 6 months in the States. She didn't have a good network of friends. She was working stupid hours. And we suddenly thought, gosh, Trump had said the borders were going to be closed. So when we thought about that in binary terms, like, okay, daughter, stranded, not stranded, my husband and I got a bit tense. And we went through quite a lot of anxiety and started thinking, oh, gosh, what should she do? But then I said, hey, come on, look, this is a tool I have. Let's do this thing. So let's think about this in terms of probabilities. And we realized on the left-hand side of that, there was a good chance that the borders would be closed in a few days. That was, it was a good chance. Moderate chance that they would be closed sooner. So it had been threatened, but there was no timeline. So there was a moderate chance it would be sooner than a couple of days, but there was zero chance that the borders would be closed immediately. And working with, okay, zero chance, they are not going to be closed in the next 2-3 hours. That means she's probably got 24 hours as the minimum and maybe 2 days as the maximum to sort herself out. And so that was enough for her. So what I counseled her was go to HR, tell them what you want to do. If you want to come back to the UK, stay, what it is you want. So she bought herself some time, because she was going, shall I go to the airport? And I was going, no, do not go to the airport without telling HR. That's what you're going to do. So it kind of brought everybody's panic and worry and anxiety levels down. So I do recommend good chance, moderate chance, zero chance in probability terms.
Okay. And I'm just going to move on to the next part of the slide here, where you say you make lists. I actually have a view about this, but I wanted to hear first from you. Why do you think it's important that people make lists?
So this slide is really if you are a team leader. So one of the ways that you can build a sense of control in people who work for you is ask them to make a list of what they're doing, and then to do that list in the order of priority. Because when you encourage someone to do that, what you're developing in them is a sense of autonomy. And that autonomy is the most important thing right now, when we have so little of it in other domains. So as a leader, as a manager, I would be really encouraging you to help other people make lists.
The reason I was like, I've been using to-do lists and stuff, but I've been recently thinking, actually, a to-do list, there are some disadvantages to using to-do lists, because ultimately you need to start planning your time in the day to actually get any of this done. That's one. So if you don't plan for it, you don't get things done. And secondly, I do also sometimes put stuff that I know is really quite easy. I could have just done it. I didn't need to put it in to-do list. Send an email. I could have just sent an email. But it just gave me this satisfaction. Okay, I can cross something off that list. And I never stopped to think, actually, was that really that important? Or does that get me closer to my goal? The thing that you mentioned when we first started this broadcast about having that goal. So how should people like myself approach these to-do lists so that we don't fall into these pitfalls?
Hey, Conrad, there's personality. Two types of personality. There's people who do lists and they put things on lists and they cross off things, and they might add things to a list they've already done to cross it off because it gives a sense of completion and satisfaction. And then there are other people who make to-do lists. Like I had a colleague, and she'd find a to-do list in her pocket from 9 months ago, and she'd go, "Oh God, there's some really good things on this list. I must do them." So she was making the list, but they weren't a tool for her, because she was much more spontaneous in her approach. So I think in the question of time management, when you feel energized, is it 2:30 in the afternoon? For me, that's when I'm desperately trying not to fall asleep. I get my peak energy and motivation, and you can do a cycle of this, track it for yourself. So I try and do my big rocks in those moments when I have the highest energy, because it's no good me trying to tackle something which needs thought at 7 o'clock at night. I can't do it. Well, my thinking is not as good as it would be at 10:30 in the morning. And by the way, it looks like people's energy is maxed out at 10:30 on a Tuesday morning. Who knew?
Really? Okay. I promise we won't keep you till. I know there's a lot to talk about. I promise we won't keep you till 2:30 in the afternoon. Just looking at the comments. Well, Shingo's joining us from Japan, and Israel's from Nigeria. So welcome. If anyone has any questions or comments for Jessica, please pop them in the comments. Jessica, you also had this other slide, which is, I think, quite intriguing. Leaving work at work. I mean, how do you even do this now? I mean, it says that 1927. So I don't know how we would do this right now when, work is in the home. Work is everywhere now.
Work is everywhere. So we're not going to, going back to what I said about control, we are not going to have control over a lot of things, but we have pockets of control. And so the question is, how do we focus on those pockets of control? So even if you're working at the kitchen table with your partner and a kid, you can still decide, I'm going to shut my laptop at 6:30 or whatever time suits you. And you shut your laptop and you say to yourself, I'm done. And you create a mini ritual around that, because it's the plan and the ritual that reinforces your promise to yourself. And I think the hardest people to negotiate with are ourselves. I mean, in that they're the easiest, maybe, because it's so easy to undo a promise to yourself. And when you do that, it's simply not healthy. It's not healthy for and good for your mental well-being. So if you said to yourself, I'm going to shut my laptop at 6:30, shut your laptop at 6:30, you're doing yourself a favor, and you make the ritual. So what I do is I shut my laptop, I turn off my LED light, which you might see reflected in my glasses. I turn off my LED light, I go out the room, and I leave my laptop. Now, it's not to say that I'm not going to look at my emails. I may look at them once or twice on my phone, but I am not going to answer them. If there's something that comes in, I'll say, I'll get back to you tomorrow, so somebody knows. But I'm just made that promise to myself, because right now, I think you talk to managers everywhere. Everyone said, I'm on a knife edge, and we're having to deal with a lot of stuff. And so the one thing we can do is be kind to ourselves, and by being kind to ourselves, we can leave work at work. So wherever that is, I've got a friend whose wife is working at their kitchen table, and he's in the spare room. And what he does is, she has a work chair, and every Friday evening he carries it out to the garage, and every Sunday evening he brings it back in. It's just those small things that signal to ourselves, I'm done. This is my time off. Because we don't have that kind of interstitial time commuting.
Mm. Do you
So
think we'll continue like this even this sort of work pattern, even after COVID is controlled?
I think we're going to be in a hybrid space. So some people will want to continue contributing like this. Other people will want to absolutely 100% be back in the office. I think lots of businesses are going to get people in when there's teamwork, thought work that needs to be done together. And there's going to be a lot more latitude about how we work.
Mm. Because we read about how heads of Wall Street banks are saying, this whole work from home, it's an aberration. They want to bring thousands of employees back into these very expensive commercial real estate that they paid for. Whereas tech firms are saying you can work from home for indefinitely. So
Yeah.
how do you think this is going to play out in terms of that war on talent?
Oh gosh, I think that's a really interesting question. I mean, I think David Solomon, it was Goldman's, wasn't it, who said that? He said it last week. Some people are going to want to have flexible working, and they will take their talent elsewhere where they can do that. I know quite a few tech and biotech businesses, and absolutely they've already said, and a couple of places which I consult to, they've already said you can have a home-based contract or an office-based contract. And frankly, if you're in sales, why would you take an office-based contract? Your job is to be out on the road, seeing your customers and clients. So I'm sure that we're going to see quite a change in organizations also going to have to make cost savings and cut back. It makes financial, economic, and everything else sense to enable us to work from home.
I mean, coming back to your book on happiness at work, one other C that you talked about was culture. So how do you think leaders can build a good culture when we've got to do this hybrid work model?
I think it's a values-based thing. So, and I think the values on the one hand and trust on the other. So if you trust that people are going to do a good job and you're not counting the keystrokes on their keyboards, if you trust, they will. Most people rise to trust rather than abuse it. And I think that that's been one of the great lessons of the pandemic, is just how efficient very many people can be while working in quite difficult circumstances. And productivity, by and large, has not taken a massive hit for knowledge workers. On the contrary, it's increased. So I think, as I said about Bill Michaels, the thing that you are required to do as a senior leader is to motivate and inspire. In fact, as any leader, your job is to motivate and inspire and get blocks out of the way for other people. And if your culture is doing that and it's fair, people think that fair is incredibly important. I think that's one of the most telling things about a culture. Is it fair? Is it values driven? And are people building trust? And if that's the case, your business will thrive.
Yeah, I think we will see some organizations take this to an extreme. I remember some years ago, one of our alums, he started a company. He didn't know how to code, so he got some freelancer coder in the Ukraine, and he was through some agency, and he was so excited that he could actually monitor the number of keystrokes that the person was doing. And the agency that got the freelancer also took random screenshots at random times so that he could see, oh, actually the guy's really doing what I paid him to do. So yeah, it is just crazy.
But then you'd start putting in, what you start doing is gaming the system, and you just start typing any old stuff because your keystrokes are being counted. Then you just get rid of it all. So, people game systems like that. My daughter is a designer. So, she could produce 800 designs in a day, but really, if she does one that sells $10 million worth of stuff, that's the one. The rest of it, who cares? So, it's for her, it's not quantity, it's quality. And I believe that pretty much everywhere, actually.
Yeah, I think this is it's going to be interesting how different organizations use have a strategy in terms of attracting and retaining talent like your daughter, because for that sort of people, they are not going to be motivated by that sort of piecework, being paid by the piece, but really being paid by what is the impact that they bring. And it goes back to what you mentioned about purpose and calling, I think.
Yeah. And she was recruited on Instagram, by the way.
Oh.
Someone saw her designs on Instagram. So that's another whole way of recruitment.
Okay. Anyway, we have a question from Big Bang. Do you believe in performance evaluation by employers in this pandemic work environment?
Performance evaluation. So the one thing I really disagree with is GE's method of performance evaluation, where you rank order your employees. But I do believe, because it's just simply massively demotivational. And again, the system is to be gamed. But I do believe in telling people what they should keep on doing because it works well, and what they should start doing because that would help everybody and it would help them work better. So I'm a great believer in keeps and starts, but formal stuff. I think managers are responsible for the success of people in their team. And so permanent ongoing feedback is the way to go. But performance evaluation, there's quite a lot of data saying it doesn't really add that much value.
For those who don't know the GE's performance evaluation, I think it came about with Jack Welch, where he forced every manager to rank their employees, and then there was a curve, and every year they would just let the bottom 5% go. And it was a very mechanistic way of thinking that in 30 years we'll only need one CEO, right? So let's whittle, and the whole process was to whittle people down to this last man. Yeah, it was always a man. Last man standing.
But then lots of other places went and implemented it. And it was just, it was actually the bottom 10%. And so then if you've got a team of 10, you're having to manage one person out. Even if they're good, you have to manage them out and replace them with somebody else. So I did some consulting work with one organization that was implementing this. And I went to Italy to talk about how the management team there were doing it. They were, oh, no worries. What we've done is we've recruited one person into the team, a family member. They're going to do nothing. We just manage them out at the end of the year, and we keep our team intact. So, people find crazy ways to game the system. Well, not that I'm advocating for that, but it's just.
Okay. I almost thought you were going to say, how do you manage a family member out of a family business, which probably is going to be almost the answer is basically impossible.
Impossible.
Yeah.
With difficulty.
Well, Jessica, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show. How can people find out more about you or contact you?
So go find me on LinkedIn. I'm Jessica Pryce-Jones with a Y, and I'd be delighted to connect on LinkedIn. And otherwise, I've got a new website coming soon. About 3 years ago, I thought, gosh, I'm clever and funny and witty. And I bought this domain name and then did nothing with it because I thought everything has to be delivered then online. But hey, that's what we're doing. So website it is.
Yeah, okay. Are you able to tell us a bit about what website is about?
So I'll be doing what I've done before, which is a bit of consulting, organizational development work, a little bit of leadership development work, and executive coaching. And so quite often those are combined in a package or just delivered individually. But I think the thing that's a bit different about this is I think beyond happiness at work, I was thinking there's something else. That we look at hard data, we look at soft data, and we absolutely ignore intuitive data, although we make all our decisions based on it. So I remember interviewing the head of the BBC, and I said, how do you decide to spend 100 million on costume drama or football? And he said, I collect all the data, we look at all the numbers, I look at the results of the focus groups, And then I make a decision and I'll sleep on it. And if it feels right, I do it. And I think that that bit of feeling right is something that it's data, it's information. How do you tap into it? And how do you know when you're right? And how do you know when you're wrong? And I'm interested in that.
Yeah. And for people who are interested, this is a link to Jessica's book, Happiness at Work. I think we've got the link in the comments as well, so you can follow that on Amazon. So thank you very much, Jessica. That's all the time we have for today. You've been a great audience, and a reminder that you can join us for an after. If you want to continue this conversation, you can join me on Discord today at 4 to 4:30 p.m. UK time. So I'll be back next week when Omar Garrett, one half of the LinkedIn guys, will talk about how you can improve your social media profile to get that job. Maybe actually we should have just gotten Jessica's daughter, who since she got her job on Instagram. Is that right? So thank you very much, Jessica.
You're welcome.